Sampson Energy. So if you could give those guys a round of applause, thank them very much. And I know it's very difficult during the legislative session, and we can't catch everybody because they have committee meetings, but to our elected officials that are able to join us today, thank you guys so much for taking time out of what I know is a very busy schedule to come and visit with us. So there is paper on your tables if you would like to write down a question, something that you're interested in, and we'll get it asked if time allows. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Max Correa, the immediate past chair of the Chamber of Commerce, who's still volunteering his time and hasn't run away yet, and he will get us started. So thank you all for being here.
Do we have mics up there? Well, before we get started, if we could get everybody to turn off any of their electronic devices or put them on vibrate, silent, whatever's easiest. Thank you. Well, thanks again to our panel for taking time out of their busy schedule to be with us this morning. We certainly appreciate it. We know you've got a lot on your plate, no pun intended. Yes. And we're going to try and keep our answers to a 60-second time frame, if possible. I'll be timing you. I'll kind of wave at you when you've got about 10 seconds left, if that's okay. So we'll go straight into it. And since Representative Landon Brown is not eating currently, we'll start with you. Which bills do you think will have the greatest impact, both that excite you and concern you, on Laramie County businesses?
Wow, that's a very good question.
Can everybody hear?
I've got a lot of my voice probably with that. I'll talk loud and we'll see if they can. Okay.
There we go.
Okay. That does sound like I can hear myself talking now. That's a really good question. First, let me start off by thanking Sampson Energy and the Greater Cheyenne Chamber of Commerce for putting this on. I think the biggest thing, more than anything else right now, is going to be the budget bill, and to see how the $105 million to local communities is going to be distributed out, and whether or not we as a collective body decide to bring that forward and make sure that not only Cheyenne but the rest of the communities throughout the state are actually able to continue to count on the funding that they were originally promised to a year ago. So first and foremost, I think that's the biggest one. But there's a lot of other bills that are floating around out there right now. I think the committee work is doing its due diligence, making sure that we get good bills out to the floor and debate those good bills. I do know that there was a bill for the lottery that just passed the House on general file the other day, and I think that's a pretty good bill as well. That's going to allow anything up at over $6 million to be taken back to anything for the communities, anything that's sold for the lottery back to the communities.
Thank you. Senator Ellis, same question to you. What bills do you think are most important to Laramie County businesses?
Hello? That one doesn't work. Hello? Well, I just wanted to thank everyone again for being here at the breakfast this morning. My name's Affie Ellis, and I represent Senate District 8, which is Southwest Laramie County. I got to tell you, the bill that I'm most excited about this session is the Transportation Network Company bill. And I hope to not steal too much of the good work that my colleague here has been doing, but it's started in the House, and Representative Zwonitzer, sitting to my left, is one of the biggest drivers and a co-sponsor of that bill, or sponsor of that bill. But essentially, we're just trying to get companies like Uber and Lyft to Wyoming. While I was on the campaign trail this summer, I heard a lot of people talk about how Wyoming's going to diversify its economy. And this is a great way for us to provide jobs for people that are here. It's something you can do in your off time, or if you wanted to do it full time, there are opportunities for that, but it's very market driven. And I think it addresses some other concerns that we have in our community about transportation needs. And while I was out there this summer talking to folks at their doorstep, a lot of people were concerned about how to get to their medical appointments and just getting around Cheyenne if they've had too much to drink. So I think this is a really great thing for Wyoming. I'm really excited about that particular bill.
Thank you. Representative Zwonitzer.
Sure. Again, thank you for having me. Dan Zwonitzer. I represent District 43, which is South Central Laramie County, Eastern Cheyenne. A couple of the other bills we haven't mentioned, and none have a huge impact on Laramie County, but a couple of small impacts. We have 3 different alcohol bills going through the session. Through those, we should free up about 3 or 4 extra liquor licenses for this community that can be used, for economic development, recruitment of businesses, better quality of life. We have kind of an intriguing bill on extraterritorial authority, which is more of a delineating post that says what the city and the county can do and what each can do in their respective areas without exerting extra authority on the other, depending on where your business is, if it's in the city limits or in the county. You'll find it to be a good or a bad bill. And I think, just the multitude of education bills we have going through this session, we have at least 6. I'm not sure what all is going to pass, but we do have kind of an education funding crisis. And, on the outlook of each one of those pieces of legislation, your mill levies may go up, the class sizes may be increased. And so those do have some serious long-term effects for not only Laramie County, but our state on how we educate our children and getting a knowledgeable workforce. So those are kind of 3 to watch.
Thank you. And Representative Byrd, same question.
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank the Chamber and the sponsors for having us for breakfast here. Welcome to House District 4. You are in the 44. You are in the corner of my district in this portion of downtown, and it stretches to the north out to Pershing. But back to the question, the disadvantage of going last is my colleagues here have taken all the good stuff that I was going to talk about if I would have gone first. So I guess one of the things that we need to look at is we have a bunch of tax bills that are coming. We're going to change, we're looking at restructuring the sin taxes, some alcohol taxes, and that sort of thing. And that will play directly into what we do here in Laramie County and affect a lot of your businesses. So those are things to watch. I'm not really a fan of raising taxes at all. So looking at most of these things right now, I could probably go all day without voting for them.
Thank you. Next question, and we'll just start with you, Representative Byrd, since you still have the microphone. What do you think of Senate File 11, liquor license suspensions?
Well, that's a good question. Having a the whole way we do liquor licenses in the first place is, in my opinion, is suspect. Lack of a better term, we have really a cartel, and so to put an administrative apparatus over there that can take away your liquor license, I think it's appropriate when you start breaking the rules repeatedly that you can lose your liquor license. And we very seldom do you ever hear of anybody losing a liquor license. So I'm not sure that this may have teeth in it, but the effectiveness comes in the actual, are we really going to make sure that this works? Are we really going to, if we do adopt this, are we really going to enforce this? We have lots of rules, just not even in the liquor commissions, but the other things that we do where we put these forward and we choose not to enforce them. So I guess the proof is what we do if we adopt this.
Thank you. Representative Brown, same question.
I haven't had a solid chance to really look at a lot of the Senate files that are floating around, but I will say I agree with my colleague here that it's going to be a very interesting dynamic if we do pass this bill. It makes it through the Senate and the House as it reads. It's going to be a very interesting process to see how it's enforced. We have a lot of opportunities right now with other liquor licenses that I believe have a little bit more merit. And I've also always kind of had a little bit of a heartburn with the the Liquor Commission and the way that our liquor is handled out throughout the state of Wyoming. I don't know that there's a lot of information that we can change on at this point, but as far as Senate File 11 goes, I think the proof is going to be in the pudding. I think it's really going to be much more in how we actually effectively put the law into action and whether or not we actually see it enforced on a full-scale level.
Thank you. If we could pass the mic over to Senator Ellis. Oh, does it work? Okay.
Not enough coffee this morning. Thank you for the question, and I think I'm at a bit of an advantage, having been a Senate file, and the Senate has actually already passed and looked at this bill. But essentially, there was some concern over, if I recall the details correctly, that the current process for appeal right now involves a determination by the Department of Revenue's director. And there was some concern that the Department of Revenue would be one of the, for lack of a better term, prosecutors of a license revocation process, and then you'd have the director acting as a judge. So I think the intent of that bill was to streamline that process so that we're actually not having a determination by the Department of Revenue director, but actually through a different appeals process altogether, so that the Department of Revenue can present its information and evidence of why a license should be revoked. And then that decision-making authority, I believe, now is within the Office of Administrative Hearings and Appeals. So in full disclosure, that came through the Revenue Committee, of which I sit on the Senate side, and I did vote for it in its final passage.
Thank you.
And batting cleanup, I as well hadn't really even read Senate File 11. It was a Revenue Committee bill. The Corporations Committee, this interim, we had 4 interim studies on alcohol. Actually, I would say in my 12 years, we've had more bills on alcohol this year than I've ever seen in 4 different committees.
Is there a trend?
Something might be going on. We actually had a bill yesterday, died in the House in a committee to just do away with the entire liquor commission process. It went down 0 to 9 because it was maybe a good idea, but a little hasty. We have a bill up today at lunch that actually would allow the city to recoup the average market value of a license when transferring a license to a business. So instead of the $1,500, let's say you get now, you get whatever the private market is, the city or the county, depending, would get that money. So that's a pretty controversial bill, but it would certainly provide a much greater amount of revenue. And if anyone's interested, that will be in Corporations Committee at lunch about 1 o'clock today.
What number is it, if you know?
I will, you would think it's in my committee at lunch. I'd know it by the number. I'll find it here in just a second. Let me get that back to you. But
Great, thank you.
And actually this year in Management Council, Corporations was giving free license on any alcohol bill. And so we did have 6 or 7 issues before us, whittled it down to 4 bills, and I think 2 of those are still moving through, plus 5 or 6 other bills dealing with alcohol this year.
Excellent, thank you. This is a question from the audience, and we'll go with Senator Ellis on start off on this one. As representatives of the Equality State, what are your thoughts on House Bill 135?
Thank you. I will say that being on the Senate side, and I think you've kind of got a taste for that this morning, that just looking at the sheer number of bills that you work on, when you're on the Senate side, you really do focus on those Senate files that are immediately before you. So I'm aware of House Bill 135. I've received a lot of emails against the bill, but a handful of those in favor of it. And I just look forward to a robust discussion on it when and if it does come to the Senate side. But so far, I don't believe it's had a House hearing or has been before the entire House for consideration.
Okay, thank you. Representative Zwonitzer?
Sure.
Might as well keep the mic.
House Bill 135 has been assigned to our Judiciary Committee. If the bill is heard, it is likely it will pass out. And it really stems from, many of you know, from a case in Pinedale we had with a judge who, to a reporter, basically said she was against same-sex marriage and would probably not officiate a wedding. Even though she didn't say that in official capacity, with a reporter late at night, got back, she had a finding from the State Board of Judicial Conduct and Ethics, and it had a hearing, it's awaiting an outcome from our Supreme Court. So I think the response is a little hasty based on that one issue, that we're going to have some broad sweeping policy changes. This will be similar to what we call a RFRA, Religious Freedom Restoration Act. We've seen in other states, notably Indiana and North Carolina in the past 2 years. And I think as business owners, most of you are familiar with what I guess Indiana and North Carolina saw in respect to businesses, national football league? One of them, not NCAA's, refused to come to North Carolina, and so they saw, I think, the extreme pushback from businesses, and I believe if the bill passes, you'll see that in Wyoming. So it does actually have more legs than people think, and it'll get to the House floor. I'm pretty confident. Whether it has 31 votes, it'll be probably within 3 votes either way. So email your legislator.
Thank you. Representative Byrd, same question.
Thank you. First of all, I think that it's just a horrible concept. As the state of Wyoming and what we stand for in this state, it just amazes me every time that we come around. We have to have conversations like this. We have public officials who are appointed to serve in the public trust. I have my own personal opinions about a ton of things. I put those personal opinions in my back pocket when I go to work every day at the legislature to do the people's work. And so, as Representative Zwonitzer said, this bill is really over the top to kind of fix a problem that really isn't a problem. At least I don't think it's a problem, but the conversation needs to be had. So the bill is in the House. Unfortunately, it will probably make it out of committee, and as Representative Zwonitzer said, it will be a close vote. It will probably be within 3 or 4 votes either way. I would hope that we could kill it on the House floor and we would be done with it.
Thank you. Representative Brown.
This is actually one of those questions that I don't think batting cleanup is quite a disadvantage.
Somebody has to do it, I'm sorry.
That's right. I'll go ahead and be the typical politician here. I'll kind of dance on the fence here because I understand the concept of the bill, and I get the concept of the bill, especially from a private industry perspective, that we don't necessarily want government telling us what we can and can't do in our own business. And the perfect example comes from our neighbors to the south here with the cupcake for the gay marriage, and they decided they didn't want to, went to the Supreme Court, and they said, no, thou shalt make cakes. I don't know that that's necessarily the level of government involvement I want in private business. And I think this bill is attempting to go that way. However, the language that is presented in the bill right now, I have some heartburn on. I'm not so keen on the language that is, as it's written, I don't think it's actually the correct way to go about what we're trying to fix. So it'll be an interesting discussion. There's no doubt about it. I think it's going to be a very powerful discussion and very emotional discussion as it moves forward. But I would just encourage everybody to continue to make sure you voice your opinion to your legislator. I can tell you this is probably one of the 5 or 6 bills that we've received the most emails on since it was introduced.
Great, thank you. And since we did make you be the cleanup guy, we'll let you start on this one. Yeah, what is your view of long-term funding solutions for Wyoming schools?
That is a loaded question. Yeah, can I choose to clean bat up here? Bat clean up here? I think it's. I think we've got a very interesting situation happening right now. I think we sat in a meeting just the other day with, especially for education. We have a lot to do in this state as far as balancing out the information and the types of businesses that we have running. Right now, we have 1, 2, 3. If you really look at 3 major industries that are supporting us on and we're balancing our backs on the budget on them, we really need to look at diversifying our economy. And I think that starts with promoting local businesses, the mom and pop shops here, and making sure that they have the open freedom to do as they need to do, and we're not burdening them with regulations. And I think that that's going to be one of the biggest things. So diversifying our economy, keeping our tax structure low, but I also think balancing our tax structure is a little bit of a better idea as well. Right now, like I say, we balance it on the backs of coal, oil, and natural gas, and that's gotten us into the mess that we're in right now.
Thank you. Representative Byrd.
Thank you. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about, is education and the money. Basically, we tied it to the mineral interest. It was actually put that way constitutionally with the creation of the PMTF. And now that we see a worst possible scenario is all 3 of the industries that put money into these funds are in a downward trend. We've never seen that at the same time before. In times past, we'd have 1 or 2 of these these industries down or not firing on all cylinders, and we were able to move things around the board with ease and take care of that. But now we're in a total reduced economy about this, and so what we need to do is change the way that we approach the administration and the way we lay out schools. We've been spending a lot of money to get back to the top where we need to be. In my opinion, that is money well spent. But now what we need to do is take a look at how we're spending those dollars. We spend an inordinate amount of money on administration inside these school districts, which I think is overburdened because really, if you look at it, the education goes on in the classroom. The teacher in the classroom and with the proper teaching tools is what we're all about. So at that point, I think we need to concentrate on how we reorganize the educational system, and that should give us the efficiency we want to save money.
Thank you. Do either of you have a preference on who gets the cleanup?
What I said wasn't important. So let me give you the really bleak picture now.
I heard you.
Even when the money started going away and we all started realizing it, I don't think anyone wanted to believe it. And so we've known that we have a structural deficit for about 5 years, and nobody's wanted to do anything about it. And it's getting worse every year. And even this year now, we're talking about a super committee to solve the problem, but even now, legislators don't have an excitement about taking the steps necessary. So we do have an omnibus bill that I think is going to have 4 or 5 different parts between class sizes and cutting staff and maybe a property tax mill levy, and putting it all in one bill so no one can vote no. If you put it in 5 or 6 bills, we can knock them out one by one. Nothing passes. You have a $400 million a year structural deficit in education, and it's going to hit in 2 years, and nobody in the legislature has a plan. I mean, I just can't make it sound any more bleak, because it is. 25% of all schools, I mean, we don't have the funding to fund them right now. So I'd love to give you a good answer, but I think it's going to involve a mill levy, some type of tax, or a radical, you'll see us go from, what, number 6, number 7 in the country to number 30, number 40 again, like we were in the 90s. We just don't have the money to do what we've been doing for the last decade.
Thank you.
Optimism in the end.
Yes, sir, do we have a...
Well, I think that's got to be my default answer, right? Well, a big reason I ran is, I've got 3 kids, and they're all in elementary school, and so I know very clearly that the decisions that we make as a legislature will affect the quality of the education my kids are receiving. I had dinner with somebody the other night, and we were talking about this situation with reduced funding. And I think, as Representative Zwonitzer said, for a lot of years it was just easy to throw money at education and not really ask a lot of questions about, are we getting bang for our buck? So this, if you want to be optimistic, this is a really great time to start really examining with a fine-tooth comb what kind of value we've gotten for the dollars we spent in education. So the House will have a large omnibus bill, and because they're the House, they can include revenue-raising measures. On the Senate side, you will see some education reform bills that probably contain a lot of the similar measures addressing class size and things like that. But because the bill originates in the Senate, it will not have revenue-raising measures. When I ran this summer, a big talking point, which I've taken to heart and is real, is I think our first step is to look at finding more efficiencies in our education system. And so a lot of these bills will start having that, we'll start fleshing out what that means. Being mindful that we've got 4 or 5, depending on how you look at it, education Supreme Court cases from the Wyoming Supreme Court. And we need to be mindful of providing for our constitutional obligations. That said, Wyoming, I know that there's a lot of different pots of money. I just think it's very difficult to ask people of Wyoming, either individually or through industry, to start raising taxes when we're sitting on a legislative stabilization reserve account that's $1.5 billion. So it's a dynamic problem, but I'm optimistic that through these challenges, we're going to find a solution. We will.
Thank you. We're going to stick on education here for a while, and we'll just stay with you, Senator Ellis, if that's okay. Do you support consolidation of Wyoming school districts, and if so, why?
Thank you. I think that's a really great question. Looking so far at some of the education reform measures that are out there, I don't think that issue is on the table. Right now, there are 48 school districts for 23 counties in Wyoming. And so I'm sure you've all read the paper that talks about how Laramie County first school district has the largest number of students under its superintendents and its administrative structure, whereas places like Fremont County, I believe, have 7 or 8 different school districts, and you have some superintendents that manage or oversee the instruction of 800 or so students. So I think it's a welcome conversation, but I think if you talk to folks in the education community, particularly those that are on the front line, it's not a popular idea. But the legislature put out a white paper, which I believe said consolidating our school districts into 23 representative of the counties would save about $7 million annually. So when you're looking at a problem of $700 million, I think that's the weighing you've got to do. Is it worth the effort to try and save that $7 million to address a $700 million deficit? Hopefully we'll have that conversation, but so far I haven't seen a bill to do that.
Thank you. Representative Zwonitzer, same question.
Ditto. And I think it's easy as a legislator to look at other districts and say, you know, those 2 districts in Uinta County that each have 800 kids, you could combine them and the 3 up in Bighorn. Just like I'm sure people and other legislators from other parts of the state look at Cheyenne and Laramie County and say, hey, you can combine 1 and 2, no problem. Those of us in Laramie County know we could make it happen if we had to, but I don't think we have to. It's one of those ideas we threw out, get people talking, but you're right. I think the political fallout for everyone isn't worth the $7 million a year when that's 1% of the biennium problem we're facing. So it was thrown out there, but I don't think anyone's seriously looking at it because you just wouldn't have enough legislators want to do that. The problems at home would be too great. And so while I think 48 may be too many and we could go down to 35, 36, I don't think you'll see any movement on that issue this year.
Thank you. Representative Brown, same question. We won't make you go clean up on this one.
I'm lucky enough to sit on the House Education Committee, and I'll tell you, it's not quite like drinking water from a fire hose. It's more like the water main feeding the fire hose. And this information that Senator Ellis brought up is very true. And you know, when you're looking at the ultimate scheme of $7 million savings over the heartache and the heartburn that it would cost, I think there are other cost-cutting measures that have been presented that have a heck of a lot more value. Just for instance, we look at instructional facilitators. If we were to cut those, they're not inside the funding model right now, and if we were to cut those are $22 million. Those are something relatively new to the school districts throughout the state of Wyoming, and I think that would be a little bit easier to maneuver inside the school systems to not have the additional teachers, the instructional facilitators, and save a heck of a lot more money than it would be to, for instance, combine the school districts. I think that there is, it was spoken of earlier, we have top-heavy administrations as well. I think looking at putting a cap on administrative costs, there's an opportunity there to save us about $26 million as well. You're not going to find a golden egg that's going to be worth the $400 million we're short this coming next year. You're going to find little bits and pieces that are going to add up to that $400 million, and that's what's going to get us into the funding model that we're going to have to be in for the remainder of Wyoming's existence, really. We have very little time, but I'm sure that we can accomplish what we need to by looking at these little pots of money.
Thank you. Representative Byrd.
Well, thank you. I'd have to start with agreeing with what Senator Ellis said and around the table, emphasizing again that this is a $7 million fix and the projected budget deficit is much larger. The amount of impact for this would be negligible, but the political fallout would be enormous because what we've done is we've perpetuated these little fiefdoms called school districts, and with the funding model that we use, the only thing we're doing is perpetuating that independence. I totally agree that there's a lot of places that we can consolidate. To use the example up in the basin, we have some schools that have class size that are just minimal in buildings that are not utilized to their fullest extent, and we have a school district, two different school districts that are 15 miles apart. Things like that just don't make economic sense. But for you to go in there and try to make that change in consolidation, you better be prepared to come out losing some skin out of some places. So I think, again, back to the administration comment, I think if we reorganize and we look at efficiencies, we can take some of this money out of some programs that aren't working very well, haven't worked very well, save those monies there, and look at that overhead, and we could recoup a large amount of money, just like the $22 million here, another $7 million. And after a while, you will be making a dent in this deficit. But we got some hard choices to make here. On the administrative side, again, in the classroom, I think we still could throw all the money we can into a classroom.
Thank you. And to our audience, we appreciate the questions that you're handing us, but for Dale's and my old eyes, if you could please make sure you write clearly so we can read them. Next question, we're going to change subjects here, and we'll start with Senator Ellis. Do you support replacing general funding for Department of Transportation with increased user fees?
Thank you for that question. Thank you for that question. I haven't looked at the Department of Transportation statistics, but I think that's kind of the trend that we've been going in with the Department of Transportation in general. When looking at their general fund budget and the amount of dollars they receive, I might be wrong, but it's something, a small percentage of their budget. I think I want to say around 15%. You've served on transportation, is that right?
12 years ago.
And so, you know, I know that several years ago the legislature imposed a fuel tax, and to me those kind of taxes make sense because it's, you know, more akin to a user-based system where if you're using the roads you should be paying for them, and we have obviously a lot of out-of-state traffic using our roads. So, you know, if there's a specific proposal that helps the Department of Transportation operate more independently of being reliant on general fund budgets, I think that those are important conversations to have.
Thank you. Representative Zwonitzer.
And yeah, so YDOT is primarily federally funded, and we have they have about 1,800 positions, and I would say 1,600
Sure.
of those.
I don't know.
1,800, give or take, you know, 50. But most of those are federal agent. Sorry, I had a cold all weekend, and I'm feeling better, but the voice is just coming back. So yeah, what we've been trying to do for the last 2 years, as we saw the fiscal crunch coming, is take almost anything we could to take state funds out and have everything rely on federal funds, which was really good for our budget. But I think you'll see with the new administration, when they start cutting some funding to the states, you'll see kind of a double crunch now that we've done everything we can to put to save our budget by cutting state programs and letting the feds cover everything they can. When that funding goes away, we'll really be in a hurt here in possibly 2 years. So it's great we have a new administration, but I think some of those cuts and some of that, the initiatives at the federal level will hurt Wyoming as well. I think the only tax we've passed in the last 10 years was the gasoline tax, and it was the biggest fight probably we've had in the legislature. You had to have almost every industry, every special interest group, every person we could find come out and support it, and it still only passed in the House by 33 out of 60. I mean, it was, and it's maybe still the biggest issue when I drive around is, oh my gosh, you guys passed a tax, and it was one tax in 12 years, and so the prospect of the future for funding for anything is difficult, knowing what the populace believes on raising fees or taxes.
Thank you. Representative Brown. We won't make you do cleanup on this one. Unless
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. You know, I'll be completely honest with you. I sit on the House Transportation Committee, and having seen the way that their budget works, YDOT's budget works, it is very much so what Representative Zwonitzer said. It is primarily federally funded, and we stand a good chance here of seeing some increases in user fees. I won't call them taxes. It'll be primarily your driver's license fees, license plate fees, stuff like that. And I guess the way I look at it is we are the lowest tax burden in the country, and I think that it served us well for a very good long amount of time, but we're in a position now where we can't afford to have that any longer. There has been some growing discussion that we need to leave about $30 million of general fund in YDOT's budget, and that is strictly to keep air service in Wyoming. If we don't keep $30 million in there, we will lose air service throughout all of the airports in Wyoming, and that's something that is very terrifying to me, especially here in Cheyenne, where we're talking about continuously wanting to try to grow air service. That's a big issue, and so I think you're going to see all but about $30 million leave this year. That's been kind of the talk that I've heard. I think it's a good idea. I think it brings us back and stops again balancing us on the fuel tax, or I'm sorry, off the industries that have been balancing our budgets for so long. It kind of puts it back onto us as citizens now.
Thank you. Representative Byrd.
Thank you. Representative Brown brings out a point, an important fact is WYDOT is just not roads and highways like everybody think. They have a whole bunch of other ancillary departments that are well off the radar and well off the conversation that need to be funded, like the air service, which is critical to any sort of economic development or stabilization inside Wyoming. So there are parts in the WYDOT budget that we need to be very careful when we start moving things around. Again, I can't emphasize enough that most of WYDOT's funds come from the federal government. Now, you hear the big discourse about the federal government being evil and everything, but this is a portion of our budget and a portion of an agency's budget that we really could not replace as a state and function. And as a legislator, I get the privilege of driving across the state to all points here and there and get to experience these highways. We have a lot of highways that get a lot of use, like 25 and 80, and the truck traffic on there. I don't know if anybody in here realizes that a semi-truck does 1,000 times more damage to a highway surface than a passenger car. Now, their fees to use that highway don't reflect that differential, but we need to look and address those things as who damages the roads, who makes it, deteriorates the condition of those roads, and maybe we need, first of all, to look at those things in changing the fee structures. I'm not a fan about raising the driver's license fees or the plate fees, but they're on the table.
Thank you. We've got another question from our audience, and we'll start with Senator Ellis. Oh, would you like to start? We'll let you start then.
For Senator Ellis, she gets.
I saw you were fixing your coffee. I didn't want to, But what do you think about Senate File 70 that would remove the sales tax exemption from manufacturing equipment? For manufacturing equipment, I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay. No, I think it's worked great for the past 10 years, and I think the legislative will is there to continue it. I haven't heard anyone seriously go after that we need to take it off. I mean, I think manufacturing is, if it's not our fourth largest industry, we're certainly trying to make it our fourth largest industry. Everybody will talk about how great Magpul is. We've had some other opportunities I think we've lost the past 4 years in getting some more manufacturing here. But manufacturing in America is getting tougher and tougher to recruit. I mean, every state is doing all they can to get that type of industry. And so anything we can do to remain competitive in the marketplace, I think is appreciated, and I think it's worked well. And I haven't, maybe Senator Ellis can tell you if she's heard discussions in the Senate, but I think most of the legislators, that's maybe the one area we're all in agreement to keep it going.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you. I'd just say ditto, and then I'd also add that the Senate Revenue Committee will be hearing this bill today, 30 minutes after the noon recess at the Jonah. So if you'd like to come on down and listen to some riveting debate, we'll be talking about moving the sunset date from 2017 to 2027.
Comments?
Well, this is one that I'm familiar with because of the legislation at hand. The sunset date, I haven't heard any discussions on the House side as to the criticality of this nature. In fact, it hasn't risen. Basically, it's off the radar for most of the conversations we've been having about revenue over there. So when we get something like that, we just keep it status quo as long as it's not affecting the industry, which I don't see any radical changes in manufacturing. So I'm sure that if it makes it around to our side of the fence, I'll be voting for to increase this and keep move the sunset out a few years.
Thank you. Representative Brown.
I'll just start by saying I think it's benefited Laramie County tremendously, and I am in full support of it. Again, I would agree with everybody that's spoken so far. I don't believe there's any animosity towards moving the sunset date out in either house that I've been aware of. So Laramie County has benefited from it. We've also had Albany County, who has brought in tungsten as well as high-vis. We've had quite a few manufacturing companies come in and take advantage of this awesome tax break that they would not see from our neighbors to the south, for instance. So anything that we can do to remain competitive, I think we should continue doing. And I don't think that it's something that we need to be looking at adjusting our taxes or anything like that in an upward motion. If we've been living without it this far, I don't know that it's necessarily worth adjusting it at this point.
Thank you. Kind of switching gears here, and then we've got another question from the audience, and I'm wondering if it's from the insurance guy behind me. I'm an insurance guy as well, so this one is something on our radar. For the Uber and Lyft, how are insurance requirements going to be tracked to ensure they stay in force? And I'm going to add to this question, since we don't track insurance requirements now other than when somebody gets pulled over. And we'll start with Representative Byrd on that question.
I'd like to pass this one to Representative Zwonitzer. No, actually,
I'm going to let him do cleanup.
Oh, okay. I sit on the Corporations Committee along with Representative Zwonitzer, who chairs that, and we have been discussing Uber since the interim, or transportation companies, Uber to be the one primarily on the discussion block. We talked about insurance and keeping that insurance. How do we come and tell whether the company is liable in a particular instance or whether the driver has liability? I believe in our last meeting we kind of stepped through a scenario where the company requires, they have a series of requirements for each one of their drivers that they have maintained a certain level of insurance on their vehicle before Uber will allow them to drive. So they do some due diligence there to make sure that the drivers that they're dispatching are properly insured. But in the course of Uber's umbrella and the way that their operation works, from the moment that you as a customer sit inside that Uber requested vehicle, the Uber policy would be the blanket overriding policy for that entire time that you're in there. And I think instead of stealing all the thunder on this, I'll leave a little bit for Representative Zwonitzer to fill in at the end.
Okay. Representative Brown, we'll let you tag on to that.
I will make my response short and sweet because the two we're sitting over here have definitely done a lot more work on this than I have. I will tell you that my understanding of this, I actually had a good discussion with the chairman just about a week ago about this, is that the transportation network company themselves are actually going to be providing the insurance while the driver is there, and that actually covers the majority of the issues that we're hearing about and coverage of insurance and stuff like that. So my understanding is they will not even accept you if you don't have a certain amount of insurance up to a certain point, and that covers us up to that point. But then again, the overarching umbrella comes from Uber or Lyft or whoever the TNC would be.
Thank you. Who wants to go first?
So, sure, I'll take it. And interestingly, when people say, why don't we have Uber or Lyft in Wyoming, it really is an insurance issue and an insurance bill that we need to have our statutes just, I guess, delineate when someone working for one of these TNCs is on their private insurance and when they're on, company insurance. So if you're on your way to pick up a passenger, when the passenger's in your vehicle, after you've dropped them off on your way home, you just have to basically delineate those in statute. The interesting thing about our TNC bill is Idaho is the only state right now that doesn't really regulate TNCs. There's no state agency or municipality. They're just kind of governed by themselves. So Wyoming is following that model for the time being because we don't have any state oversight or licensing of taxi cabs or limos. It didn't seem appropriate to do that for transportation network companies. And so we're basically letting them regulate themselves. When you get into an Uber or a Lyft in Wyoming, if this bill passes and you have a problem or a complaint, you're going to deal directly with that company, not with any government over regulatory agency that can help you out. And so we'll try that and hope it works. And if there are some issues in future years, we can come back and assign YDOT or the insurance commissioner or someone to kind of be the consumer protectorate. But the way the bill's structured right now, I mean, we have some fines and penalties in place, but there's no government enforcement over it.
Senator Ellis?
Thanks. I just want to add, because I know the House added some amendments, I went over this last night. It's like anything else. When you don't have insurance, there are fines and penalties. So if you are caught without having insurance and you're an Uber driver, you're subject to a misdemeanor punishable by imprisonment of not more than 6 months, or a fine that can be between $250 and $750 or both. If you're caught with a subsequent violation, that increases to between $500 to $1,500 and another 6-month sentence. So I think that people that are going to be engaged in this will take it very seriously. And just to flesh out a little bit about what happened, and I don't want to speak for my colleague here because he lived through this, there were several people that testified and supported this bill in the House Corporations Committee, obviously Uber being one of them, various insurance companies, the Wyoming Lodging and Restaurant Association, airport operators, and then an Uber contract driver who lives in Cheyenne but drives in Colorado, and then college students. So I think another important feature to mention about this bill is it also addresses what kind of background checks your drivers have to have completed. If you have any kind of felony within the last 7 years, you're prohibited from being an Uber driver, and that's, I think, the example that we have. But it's also access to other national criminal databases. And so, 35 states, I believe, have legislation for their entire state on regulating these transportation network companies. Wyoming is one of the last states to have Uber or Lyft come to it. Right now, there are 47 other states that have this service available. And so I just have confidence that we can figure this out. And as we see how it rolls out in Wyoming, I think there'll be a lot of eyes watching on how we can do it better if we need to adjust those laws and provide more oversight. But right now, a lot of it's market-based driven. Riders are able to communicate whether or not a driver's a quality driver. I think there was just a skit about this on Saturday Night Live last weekend about, is my driver a 4-star driver or a 5-star driver? Is the passenger a 4-star passenger or a 5-star passenger? And so they were having this cute little interaction about trying to be the best passenger, being the best driver. And so having used the service myself, I can tell you that a lot of this is very much self-regulated.
Thank you. Okay, switching gears here, and we'll start with Senator Ellis, unless somebody wants to be first. The Chamber has long supported the national IST. We supported the state level as well, but have a question about its workability. Thoughts? I'm going there. What is your opinion of House Bill 19, the Internet Sales Tax? We'll start with Senator Ellis.
Thank you for that question. I will tell you I have not read a lot of House bills yet, and I can tell you that it's because I read every day for hours and hours, and they're all Senate files. So my knowledge of this bill is only from what you hear from folks and just the broad brushstrokes. But, I think it's important for mom and pop organizations. My family grew up in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and my dad had a small business. He ran a welding shop. And, that was the business that put food on the table. That's the business that put clothes on my back. And so it's very concerning when you hear about large retailers that are able to evade having to collect taxes that are due to the state of Wyoming at the disadvantage of local businesses. So, with that lens, I think that's how I would approach looking at that bill, but definitely want to hear the discussion and obviously study the language carefully to make sure that that's the objective that the language does achieve, is providing parity.
Thank you. Representative Zwonitzer.
Ditto. Isn't it fun to just ditto everything? No, everything was true. The market, Senator Enzi's been pushing this concept for 20 years almost in D.C. We called it the Marketplace Fairness Act. It had another name when the U.S. House passed it, and they just haven't been able to do it at the federal level. And it really does impact smaller states like Wyoming, where you can, as a former small business person, we could have people come into our store, see what the item cost, us, and they'd go online, see that it was cheaper and didn't have to pay tax, and they'd order it. And I think a lot of small businesses in Wyoming are continuing to have that problem. And so you would actually have people price shop, not buy from you and go on the internet. So increases parity, increases fairness. There's a lot of people out there saying it's a new tax or you're taxing us more. And I mean, it's a perspective issue. You can agree with that, you know, you're going to pay a sales tax you haven't had to pay before, but an issue of fairness for all retailers is something that I think we should have done 10 years ago. I think Congress should do it. That would make it so much easier if the feds did it for everybody and we wouldn't have the state level hassles we've been having. But no, I think it's good for Wyoming overall, even though there's some consumer grumbling that, you know, buying stuff on the internet, you're going to have to start paying taxes. But those taxes come to Wyoming and help us not have a state income tax and pay teachers and do all the other great things that, you know, government's required to do.
Thank you. Who would like to clean up on this one? Okay, Representative Byrd.
Okay, thank you. I'm in the computer business, and one of the big complaints about is all of the changes that you have to make to your computer systems to have this work. It is really only as a moderate programmer, it's a 15-minute change. Depending on who you have do it for you, you know, they'll charge you a lot of money for it. But back to the important part of this is you're already being charged tax by just about everybody you do business with on the internet. If you go out there and buy something on Amazon or somebody else, and you go to that checkout screen, you will notice that the Wyoming tax is already calculated in there for these people in most of these cases on the internet while you're buying a lot of this stuff. So what we're doing now is just saying, okay, everybody sits at the same table and we have some uniformity across the internet so that the state of Wyoming is collecting the tax that it's due. The small businesses are not at a disadvantage from these other, you know, the people who like to shop around and see if they can avoid paying this tax. But if you're going to do this sale inside Wyoming, you're going to pay a Wyoming sales tax regardless of where on the planet you sit. It's a very easy programming change. The computers know where this happens. And so it's just one of those things is where technology in Wyoming have finally caught up and got into the new millennium. It's long overdue.
I will just say that I was an aye vote as it came out of the House on this particular bill, and I was, I guess I even got quoted on one of the radio stations this morning during some of my floor testimony. I want to be clear that it's not a new tax. Yes, it's all a matter of perspective, but you know, if you buy something off the internet, you were originally supposed to be paying use tax, and I can pretty much guarantee that I've never seen anybody walk down to the Department of Revenue in this room and go write a check on a Friday afternoon for all the stuff that you purchased Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday to the Department of Revenue.
I couldn't get an appointment.
And so I think that's the big kicker here is we're taking the onus off of the individual with this particular bill. We're not requiring the individual that should be paying that tax. We're not requiring them to do that any longer. We're actually putting the onus back on industry. And industry is now collecting that sales tax and remitting it back to the state of Wyoming. You know, when I heard a lot of talk about this on Facebook. I try to stay engaged with my constituents as much as possible, and it was a pretty negative commenting that this is a new tax. I don't want to be taxed. I like shopping online. But then they hear $28.5 million is leaving our state on an annual basis because of not having this particular law in place. That's a lot of money that Wyoming is losing out of. And I truly believe this will level the playing field for small businesses in Wyoming as well.
Okay, so we're going to follow up on that question. We'll let you finish. If it's already required, why is there a limit at the $250,000?
As far as the amount of transactions and
Yeah, so you don't
Yeah.
have 250,000 in transactions,
Then-
you don't have to pay the tax. So
Yeah.
why are we making everybody pay the tax if we're going to be equal?
Right.
that's actually a comment that I made on the floor, and I will say that the chairman of the Revenue Committee, they are the ones who put in the restrictors on that, that if you don't hit the certain thresholds, you don't have to pay. I am in absolute agreement. I believe that if you do business in the state of Wyoming, you should be collecting tax for the state of Wyoming and remitting that back to the state of Wyoming. It was recommended to us that because of similar situations occurring in other states, this is the language that's currently in other states that is going before the Supreme Court to attempt to go against what the 1992 case was. And as many of you guys know, things have changed since 1992, especially with the internet. So I'm not sure where the impetus behind putting those restrictors was for.
But it was very heavily suggested by the chairman of revenue, and with a man in PhD in economics, I tend to believe what he says a little bit, to not mess with that for the time being, but I think it's something we can come back and look at in the future.
Thank you. Senator Ellis. I see.
Thank you. I just wanted to add, I think that a big reason for the push of having some kind of limit or threshold is for small craftspeople, people that make things for Etsy, that it might be too much of a burden if you're just someone who's knitting caps and you're not really selling a ton of volume into Wyoming, that all of a sudden you're not saying, whoa, I don't want to sell my stuff to Wyoming. I don't understand their tax. I mean, I think that that's why, and I don't know if the threshold amount is correct or maybe strikes that right balance, but I think that was the motivation for having some kind of threshold level.
Thank you. Representative Zwonitzer, you have something to
Senator Ellis killed the mic. No. Yeah, I think it flashed red. But no, she was correct, exactly correct, that you're trying to differentiate between, a company or a retailer who is at that size where they understand that we have a Department of Revenue and how to submit taxes and probably workers' comp and UI and all those other things. So we tried to find that threshold both in the number of transactions per year and the limit of goods sold of what we feel in Wyoming would delineate you from being kind of an actual retailer that works with the state government and a small local person selling trinkets that may go over the border and having to track that. We didn't want to make it a burden on private individuals who aren't huge companies or trying to grow. So we put some caps, and when you exceed that, the state of Wyoming says, hey, you need to start doing all these regulatory protocols that we put in place.
Great. Did you have anything on that, Representative Byrd?
Yeah, I think I do. I'm kind of a hardliner here on this one because all of you people in this room are business people, and you're required to collect a tax, and there's no threshold on your business. So, I'm one of these people. If you're going to set up business, whether you make $100 or you make $100,000 or $1 million, if those are taxable sales, that tax needs to be collected and it needs to be remitted to the state of Wyoming. Pretty much straightforward. And that's a part of your business. That's a part of where the internet business should be, so everybody's working off the same sheet of music. At the end of the day, a sale is a sale, whether it's a face-to-face sale or whether it's an internet sale. And the state of Wyoming should look at that in its tax collection.
Thank you. Hey, we're getting kind of close to the hour here, so this will be our final combined question closing statement, if you will. I'm sorry? Yes, that's it. First, what to each of you in your closing statement, if you could give us the one thing that you would like to see the legislature achieve this year, okay? And combining with that, we've got a couple comments here. Wyoming is a low-tax state, and yet businesses are reluctant to locate here, which makes it hard to diversify. Do you think there's any long-term solutions as related to state government? Is there any money available for that type of thing? So who would like to go first while you ponder that?
Okay, I guess, yep,
He
I guess
did.
I'll go.
Yes,
Everybody's looking up
Representative
here at
Brown
each
picked
other.
up the mic first. You've got 2 minutes.
Okay. The one thing that I'd like to see the legislature be able to do this session is find and not push out this education funding shortfall. We had a very good meeting. The House had a very good meeting just a couple days ago in which every single person was out there, said, we want to work on this. We don't want to be the do-nothing 64th legislature. We don't want to push this out. We don't want to see this grow into a bigger issue. We want to see it fixed now. So I'm hopeful. I know the omnibus education bill will hit the internet probably today. If you get a chance, I would look up at that. There was also a Casper Star article on it late last night that gives a pretty good detail information there. To your other questions, as far as we do have the lowest tax burden, and yet we still have a hard time attracting some businesses here. I do think that relies a lot on us as legislators, being able to come out there and work with leads and work with anybody else to make sure that if we have businesses that are interested in coming in here, that we can bring that type of information back, why a particular business did not come in. We can come back to the legislature and work with each other to try to fix some of those issues. But I would say the biggest issue right now is workforce. And we're starting to see a growing trend of array technology over here, just a block and a half away is a great example. We don't have a computer coding school out here that really trains anybody. Now, they're not, one thing that I've learned about them is they're not looking for a certificate, they're not looking for any of this, but neither are the people that are trying to hire those people. This is a great opportunity for us to diversify our economy, is by starting looking outside the box, not the typical opportunities that you see every single day driving down to Loveland or Denver. We got to start thinking outside the box, and I think looking at technology is a huge opportunity for us, as well as manufacturing. But we have to have the workforce here before we will ever have anybody actually start coming in to open up shop.
Thank you. Representative Byrd.
Well, thank you. This is interesting in the fact that this is one of the things that I originally ran on was economic development and how do we keep our workforce. And those of you who've heard this mantra before is, well, I went to the university over the hill and I got educated and found out that I couldn't get a job in Wyoming, so I had to leave. And, you know, I say this half-heartedly, but it is really true, as our two biggest exports are energy and our youth. And what we have to do is we have to turn that tide around, is to keep our young, brilliant minds here. I mean, we educate some of the smartest people that go around the country and very successful. One of the examples I used that I learned a few years ago, that the Royal Dutch Shell, the oil company, the international oil company, has 6 international divisions. And at one point a few years ago, 5 of those divisions were headed by University of Wyoming graduates. So that in itself tells that we're on the right track for educating our people. Now we have to have jobs to keep them here. And if we can't develop some basic economics here that grow our businesses from the ground up, there's not going to be any support, anything for those people to stay. Businesses will not grow. There's a synergy. Everybody in this room that does business knows that you can't be a singularity. You need all the other businesses in this room to help you be successful. So myself on the government side, my job is to not get in there and make things crossways for you. And what I've seen in the last couple of years is my legislative constituents want to have their fingers in everything and want to have the last word on it. We are not experts in all of that matter. So what I would like to see us do is withdraw and go back to running the government instead of trying to tell all of you out there how to run private business and making all these onerous rules and hoops that you have to jump through just to do your everyday business.
Thank you. Representative Zwonitzer.
Thanks. And it's never the popular answer to say, hey, we've done everything we can, because I'm sure there's more. But I think the difficulty in the legislature, especially from being in Laramie County, is you realize the rest of the state is not like Cheyenne and Laramie. We're always in Laramie County and in Cheyenne Chamber of Commerce pushing business, pushing growth. There's a lot of places in Wyoming who don't want that growth, who don't, necessarily, they say they want it, but, their legislators certainly aren't voting for the pro-economic development, the pro-quality of life type initiatives. As a state, I think we've done so much. I mean, we're always number 1 or number 2 in the nation for places to move your business, for lowest income taxes rate, for best place to retire. I mean, we as a legislature have made this state business-friendly, welcoming, and almost every initiative we've done, from manufacturing exemptions to trying to promote economic development. And so I always like it, when you watch all the city-county people say, oh, the legislature needs to do this, and the legislature says, well, city council people, you need to do this. But I think there's some truth to that. As a state, we have done so much, and I think it really is, if Cheyenne wants to grow and you want to have the economic development, it's really up to Cheyenne, because the rest of the state of Wyoming, they don't always share the same mindset as we do in this corner of the state. And so we can continue to do policies and initiatives and subsidies and tax breaks and all of those things that a state can do, but if you want your local community to grow or your local area of the state, it's really more incumbent on your city council and the people who live in that area. I think Cheyenne is so wonderfully situated at the top of the Front Range. And I'm sure there's other things we can do, but we're facing some crises at the state level, and it's difficult just to get through those, and I'm sure the city is, but I guess maybe the message for the 64th is we need to solve the economic downturn. We've had a wonderful 14 years of growth, of development, of taking care of all the problems we had in the 90s now, and we've saved, what, we put $5-6 billion in the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund and $2 billion almost in the LSRA. We saved money. We're going to ride the wave down, but all the economic development stuff is probably going to be at the local level for the next couple of years.
Thank you. Yep, Senator Ellis, you get to clean this up.
Again, I thank you for this breakfast and the opportunity to have a very candid conversation with you. I will say one big adjustment in the Senate is everything is very formal, and so it's always Mr. Chairman, no using proper names like Uber. So it's been really fun for me to just be here and not have to address anyone formally and use words like Uber. So thank you for that. And I just think that our best days are ahead of us. You know, we have challenges right now, but I look at that as a tremendous opportunity to really reevaluate how we spend government dollars and where we focus our efforts and energy. And as someone who grew up in Wyoming but left the state seeking a little bit of an adventure, I think it's easy to look at your own experience and said, you know, what made me want to move back to Wyoming? And we have just the most beautiful place where we grow up. When I woke up this morning and I saw the snow on the trees, we live in a pretty magical place. And so I think that we keep investing in those things that make us strong. We have a strong energy economy, and I think that includes not only oil and gas and coal, but we are having some meaningful conversations about other renewables and how Wyoming wants to poise itself for that kind of future. I think we have a ton of investments we've made in education, and I think we will still be able to provide our kids with a great education in this state, even if it means using fewer dollars. But I want to make sure we're looking at our problems holistically. Again, I'm looking at my children. I want to make sure that we're providing for safe streets and making sure they have access to health care. So we can't look at problems in silos. They're all intertwined and they're all intermingled. And I think that there are a lot of good people there who see that bigger picture and want to make Wyoming the best it can be, and that means investing in our communities. I just don't think we should be short-sighted when it comes to making sure that industries that want to come here and move here have the proper infrastructure, have access to the grid, those kind of things. So I think our best days are ahead of us, so I'm just excited to be part of it and look forward to the work that we're going to do.
Thank you. Thank you to our panel, to each and every one of you for taking the time to come visit with us this morning. We certainly appreciate it. We know you've got a lot going on, and we appreciate your service and your dedication to serve and make Wyoming a better place. Thank you to our audience for being here. On behalf of the Greater Cheyenne Chamber of Commerce, thank you to Samson Energy, Town Square Media, and Blue Cross Blue Shield for sponsoring this. Let's give our panel a round of applause. And everybody have a wonderful day.